Hello, hey guys. So in this video, I'm going to talk about Mass Effect Andromeda Multiplayer, specific the Asari Adept. I think she's a really fun character to play. And in Mass Effect 3, the multiplayer, there was a character called the N7 Fury, which I loved playing with that character. It was so fun. And the Asari Adept is kind of the Andromeda equivalent of it. So there's some differences and some things that are better and worse. We can go over some of that in a little bit, but in general, I just think it's a really unique character to kind of play in multiplayer. In multiplayer games, you always have soldiers with guns, and you can have a sniper, and sometimes you got like some melee options, but Mass Effect has a lot of unique powers, like the biotics and some of the tech powers. So I think it's like a really fun thing to kind of mix up with multiplayer. And even in Mass Effect, the Adept, the way this character is built is fairly unique as well. Just because as a biotic, she's meant to use these kind of crazy powers, but she's meant for close encounters, like really high impact, up close attacks. She's basically like a walking bomb. You're running around, you're creating constant biotic explosions at a really fast rate. But because on the flip side of that is that she has really low defense, so it's sort of a high risk, high reward kind of character. It's definitely kind of a hard character to get a hold of because if you don't really know what you're doing or you don't know how to maximize her skill set, it can be kind of frustrating, and you could definitely die a lot with this character, and I certainly still do. So I'm not touting myself as like the end all be all. And the way I'm gonna suggest playing her, there's obviously different ways to play as well, but this is a fun character to play. And like I said, she's got low defense, so it's not going to be a character for everyone. There's certain things you can do to buff her defense, but and overall, she's still kind of a glass cannon. She's going to dish out a lot of damage, but she's going to go down pretty easily. So in this video, we're going to go over the what to do in the skill tree, what kind of weapon loadout you're going to have, what kind of consumables are used, and then we'll kind of go into the combat, like basic things to do with her, how to use her powers, and then just some tips on like how to fight with her. So basically, if you want to utilize all the powers that she's capable of, you're going to need all the skill points you can. So obviously, you're going to want her at level 20, and then you're going to unlock the character cards to 10, which is pretty hard to do because she's an uncommon character. I honestly haven't even unlocked her to 10. So what I'm going to be telling you and what's showing you, it's kind of what I'm aiming to do. I don't actually have all the points to get to it, but generally it's the same method. You're just going to have a lot more damage output and maybe some defense. And obviously there are a lot of different approaches you can take, and that's what makes the multiplayer so great. Is like these characters are pretty well thought out, their skill trees, and you can build a single character multiple ways. I've already kind of read about how this character can be taken into more of a sort of a defensive melee shield boosting build. But in this case, we're going to be working towards biotic explosions and just trying to create the maximum amount of damage and the quickest recharge of our powers. So let's go into skills. You're going to need her at about level 20, and then you're going to have to unlock her character to level 10, which is kind of tough to do because she's an uncommon character. And even I haven't gotten her. I've gotten her to 2. So I don't have all the skill points you need to get to the build out that I want. But that's okay because you'll still just kind of play her the same way. You just won't have the amount of damage output or maybe the shields that you will by the end. Check out the skills, and as you can see, I have most of my skill points already used up. I'm still waiting to unlock more just through character cards, but basically what I'm going to recommend is that you use throw all the way to level 6, you use annihilation to level 6, lance to level 5, offensive biotics to level 6, and barrier to 3. And I'll kind of go into what each of those means, but basically again, it's just like we're wanting the most amount of powers that we're using as often as possible, so the quickest recharge and maximum damage. So weaknesses to this are defense, just because we're not going to spend that much on the barrier and having our shields or health at a high level, and long range attacks. So this is a bit of a more advanced character because you are going to have to be, up close and friendly with a lot of your enemy components. So we'll start with, well, actually, let's start with Annihilation because this is sort of the key to the character. Annihilation is a biotic power that's really unique. No, I don't think really any other character in multiplayer has this. Maybe one, but basically, what it does is it creates a field around your character that causes damage to any enemies going in it, but it also primes biotic detonations. And what those are, I mean, basically, biotic explosions are two-part attacks that cause a lot more damage and an area of effect. So basically, an explosion with where the biotic field happens. And since you're going to be an up-close player, those explosions are going to be happening basically up in your face. So this is definitely the most important skill point to have, and I do recommend that you kind of have it maxed out. I don't actually have it yet, but if you get through, so the skill tree split at level 4. So these are automatic. We'll just skip to rank 4, and you can either choose damage radius or recharge penalty. What this skill does is that when you activate it, it slows down the recharge of your other powers. So since we're wanting to have a little bit of a faster damage output, I chose the taking away some of that recharge penalty over radius. I feel like her radius is big enough. It's not really a problem for me, especially because you're such a fast character. I think this is much more valuable. So then when you get to rank 5, movement speed, again, you're not really needing this. Your character is fast enough, and also with the dash abilities that they've added in Andromeda, you're already moving around pretty fast. So this doesn't really a big deal. So that's why I chose Damage Attractor, which enemies take an additional 20% damage from all sources, including you. So it kind of makes you a better team player, and it also will help you as far as getting up to higher levels when you can't just biotic explosion kill immediately your enemies. Like they're going to be a lot, like in silver and gold, they're going to be a lot higher health, and you're going to have to just kind of do constant damage and not just expect to just one hit destroy everything. And then when you get to rank 6, so you have shields restored or vortex, which basically just floats enemies into the air. But those that are affected are unshielded and unarmored. So this really isn't going to help you out when you get to higher level enemies in silver and gold, where they're much more often. So it feels like kind of a useless skill. When you're going against tougher enemies, you're going to get hit quite often. So anything to restore your shields is going to be helpful. Then we get to throw. I've seen some people put 0 points into this just because they want to go with a different attack, and it tends to be more melee and use lance. But to me, throw is a little bit more interesting, valuable, just because. So when you get to rank 4, you add 30% damage and force over radius. Again, radius really doesn't matter a whole lot because it does this power does home in on its enemy a little bit, and there is some sort of radius. It's not huge, but it is sort of forgiving. If you find you're just missing all the time because combat does get crazy, maybe you should take this, but I'd rather just maximize damage. Duration on rank 5 doesn't really matter at all because you're just basically throwing this power to detonate Mass Effect biotic explosions. And that just happens instantly. So having this duration really makes no sense. So, and obviously it's way more important to have recharge speed. When you get to rank 6, again, combo detonation damage and recharge speed. Those are the two things you want the most, and so this is a no-brainer. Double throw, it's 2 projectiles. I'm not sure how useful that is if the enemies aren't really near you, because then you're not really causing biotic explosions. Like, I mean, I tend to just shoot what's right in front of me, and because of the area effect of the biotic explosions, that kind of affects every enemy nearby anyway. So Then we get to Lance. So this is a definitely a new power, so it took me a little bit of time to figure out what it is. The good thing is this character has a one power that primes combo detonations, and then two powers that detonates them. That's pretty rare because some characters can't even set up and detonate their own um, combos, which is kind of crazy. So that means those characters are very dependent on teammates. This character can run solo. Like you can run solo and just cause all sorts of havoc. So that's why I like to have both of these powers. Like some people choose one or the other. But to me, because of the annihilation penalizing your power recharge, I would rather have two different powers I can use to throw out and cause damage rather than throw once and then have to wait. Even with my recharge time buffed through skills, it still feels a little long. So that's why I like to have Lance as sort of a backup. And like I said, I take this to level 5. So once you get here, I feel like I'm gonna want to choose damage and force again, just for the same reasons. You're not really needing radius unless you're missing your throws a lot. This may help you out a little bit. And then here, I'm gonna go for damage versus shields because, like I said, when you get into higher level matches, like shield, silver, and gold, you're gonna come against so many more shielded, armored enemies and high level enemies. So this is gonna be a little bit future proofing. If you're starting out this character in bronze, you might not really need this as much. But once you get to the higher levels, you're gonna really be thankful that you have something that debuffs shields. And offensive biotics. So I took this all the way to 6. Again, the idea is to maximize your damage output. So you get all the way to 4. You know, this was a tough choice. In this particular instance, I just figured recharge speeds allow me to throw my powers a little bit more often. So I took that over the power damage and force. Rank 5, debuff from biotic effects is actually a pretty good power, but again, I'm going for detonations and damage, so I chose for the 30% buff. Biotic expert, again, 30% biotic damage and force, which goes over weapon damage and melee. Now, this is the one where if you want to go for your shield boosting melee build, this is the power to pick, or at least the branch of the skill tree, because look at 50% melee damage and 15% melee force is really pretty significant. And then you're gonna have left over a couple of builds. So I just took this. I think I calculated this right. So you'll take this all the way to rank 3, and that'll pretty much use all your points. So you won't be able to max out every skill, but that's kind of the beauty of these limitations. Is that means you can kind of be a little diverse. Not every character is going to be the same. Not every partner you're going to have in this team is going to be identical. So it just goes for different playstyles. So let's move on to weapons. Again, this is a biotic character whose really primary attack is to set up and detonate biotic explosions. So you're really not needing to rely on your weapons as much, and plus you're wanting to keep that weapon weight down. In Mass Effect 3, you could actually recharge your speed past your limit, so you could actually buff it to plus 100. Here they kind of changed the rules a bit where you can't ever go above 100%, which I guess kind of makes sense. So here it really does, you have a little bit more flexibility. In Mass Effect 3, I actually got to the point where I wasn't even carrying a weapon, or I was carrying like the lightest pistol and not even firing a single shot. Here you just have something you can kind of fall back on, which is nicer, and you can even equip some assault rifles if you rather go that route, and still be at 100%. I tend to choose, people I think tend to prefer either an SMG or a shotgun. Shotgun just because you're always kind of up close with enemies doing damage, so you might as well have a shotgun to be a companion to that. I just tend to go against that because if I'm up close, I'm going to be doing damage with my powers, And there are some instances where you're gonna have to hang back and try and damage people from a distance, and it's a good idea to sort of have a weapon that can sort of offset that, because you really don't have ways to do a lot of damage from a distance. It helps to have a gun that can do that. I chose right now, because I'm still kind of in the early stages of this game. I chose the Charger. It's an SMG, pretty powerful, and it's a common weapon, so you can level it up pretty fast. So I already have it to 10. I'm sure there are way better weapons to have, but this one seems to do alright, at least up to silver. And then, yeah, I just go with the one weapon. And then for your equipment, you could go with the Juggernaut shield if you're feeling like you're going down pretty often, and you just could use the extra shield power. And if you're going for the melee build, look at that damage. Increase melee damage by 75%. There's a lot of things you could do to this character and make her really, really like a beast mode melee character. But you know, if you feel confident that you can run around and stay alive or have reliable teammates, I tend to go for the adaptive war amp, which amplifies your biotic powers. You know, the name of the game, everything is about increasing biotic powers. Consumables, anything that boosts your offensive power, so biotic power amp, combat power, power efficiency, universal power amps, and then you know, if you want, you can have defensive. Cyclonic mods are generally the most useful. The ones where you recharge your shield rate is pretty good too, but cyclonic mods, if you're wanting defense, are usually the way to go. So now we're going to go into combat basics, and really the key to this character is movement, constant movement. It's not a camping character, so you're not going to like hang back and snipe from behind cover. You're really just going to be running around and just getting it in the face of all your enemies and being in the thick of the action. And because of that, it can feel a bit spastic just because of how often you're going to have to run around, but that's kind of the fun of the character. It's a nice change up if you're used to just shooting from a distance. But this character really is all about getting from one place to the other and never stopping. So to that effect, you're going to really have to rely on your jump and dash skills, which are new for Mass Effect. They didn't have those in Mass Effect 3. And it really just helps you get from place to place a lot faster, which means, you know, you're going to really have to learn these maps, just learn how to get around and learn the escape routes, where good places of cover are. These maps are really designed for multiple entry points to any room. Like any room's going to have basically two ways to get in or out, which can be good and bad. It means, you know, enemies can kind of overwhelm you sometimes, but at the same time, it's a really good way for you to flank enemies, which is probably the safest way to go about with this character. You don't want to run up straight into a whole crowd of enemies, especially in the higher difficulties, just because you're just going to instantly go down. But if you can somehow get around and just sneak up behind them and just cause a biotic explosion to their backs, you're going to take down a whole group of enemies at once, which is pretty good feeling. Again, just keep moving. Strafing around makes it way harder for them to hit you. They're just gonna, if they're firing at you in a line and you move in that straight line, it's just gonna be so easy to hit. But if you just keep dashing around and jumping, and even when you're attacking them, circling around them, it's harder for them to sort of orient and aim their weapons at you. So as far as your combat powers, you always want to have your annihilation power on. I just turn it on at the beginning of the game, the match, and just leave it. Because unlike Mass Effect 3, where it would eventually run out and you would have to turn it on again, this one just stays on, which is so great. And it's a lot more visible. You can see the circle around you, and you can tell that it's on by the icon at the bottom flashing green. That means it's on. So sometimes it's a little hard to tell because of all the craziness around you. And honestly, in Mass Effect 3, there was a glitch to where even if you had it on, the visual indicator, the sort of aura around you wouldn't even show up. So it was really hard to tell what was going on as far as if you were setting off detonations. It seems like they fixed that in this way around, and I think they really improved this aspect of the annihilation power. One thing to note though, if you go down, your annihilation power turns off. So if you get revived or you come back the next round, if your team has made it to the next wave, just remember to turn your annihilation back on, because that doesn't come on back automatically. And sometimes it's easy to forget that you don't have it on, and you just run into, a wave of enemies and start trying to like cause explosions and nothing's happening. So just be mindful, keep an eye out for that. And also, you should realize that the annihilation power only primes the biotic explosions once per enemy exposure. So if you're going up against an enemy that has, higher armor or health or shields, and you cause an explosion, you run up to him, cause an explosion, and he doesn't go down, you're gonna have to leave or back out so that he leaves your annihilation field, and then go back in to prime again. You can't just stand there with annihilation on next to him and expect to be constantly throwing biotic explosions. Once one biotic combo is detonated, you're just gonna have to move out of range and back in again. And that's actually easy enough with the dash powers, but it's a little risky because one of the weaknesses of this character is you have to get in close. So there are some enemy types that will one hit grab you and take you down for an entire wave, and that's probably this character's biggest risk as far as all the character selections. Like, you have to be up close, so this one tends to be the one that gets grabbed during all the matches. So again, dashing in and out, in and out. So just get used to using that technique, and you should do fine. So throw is good because it auto targets. Lance will immediately hit. So they each have their kind of good and bad points. Throw is good just because there's a little bit of a leeway for your inability to hit sometimes exactly. Sometimes there's so much craziness going on that you can't just slowly take your time and aim at a character. Sometimes I'm throwing at the vicinity and the power will automatically hone in on a bad guy, but not often. Not always. Sometimes you will miss, and that's why I like to have two powers, because Lance operates differently. Lance is an instantaneous hit. It won't travel the distance. It'll, like, the second you hit it, the enemy will be affected. The downside, again, is if you're off on your aiming, you'll just miss your target. So just keep that in mind. You just want to try and be a little bit more careful with how you're throwing, but again, it's sometimes in the heat of battle you're just frantically trying to hit stuff and waiting for your powers to recharge. Another tip for that is that your reticule will show when your powers are recharging and when they're ready to go. The little bars around your aiming reticule will go down, and then they'll flash to show that they're ready. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes when you're really in action, and sometimes you're just not able to pay attention. Like, I still forget sometimes that that's even something that is helpful to me, like as far as an aid, a visual aid. So I'm still sometimes looking down, watching those little boxes try and fill up. But if you can get used to looking at the reticule for your power recharge, then it'll just make it a little bit easier for you, so you're not constantly having to look down. You can concentrate your focus on what's happening right in front of you. Alright, so that's my take on the Asari Adept in the multiplayer. I hope you found that helpful and informative, and I really hope you get to try out that build and see what you think. Like I said, I think this is a really fun character. I don't think this is by any means the only way to play her, or to build out her skills tree. I think I will want to experiment with different builds like the melee one in the future, but really I'm having a ton of fun with the character as she is now, and really glad that BioWare decided to sort of keep the essence of the N7 Fury from Mass Effect 3, because I loved playing with her, and I love playing with the Asari Adept. And yeah, just let me know if you have any feedback or additional tips. They're always kind of rebalancing the game and introducing new powers and characters and guns, so I'm sure things will change, but for now I think this is is a really great character, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.